Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? I hope I'm not too loud. I have a very loud voice naturally. Okay. Um, again, good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Andrea, and I use she, her pronouns. I serve as one of your Board of Trustee members, and I'm happy to welcome you to Tahoma Unitarian Universalist Congregation. Longtime members and new visitors alike, you are welcome here. Whether you are joining us here on site in the sanctuary or online from another location, we're glad you're here. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. And love is the power that holds us together. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. You are welcome just as you are. If this is your first time with us, I bid you a special welcome. I'm so glad you found your way to our community. After the service, I will be in the back of the sanctuary, right over there, I think. There. To answer any questions you may have about Unitarian Universalism and about our congregation, or if you want to talk about how to get involved in our community, there are lots of opportunities to get involved. So many opportunities. Please feel free to join me. For those of you here in the sanctuary, we have hearing assistance devices and large print hymnals available in the back of the sanctuary. Our ushers would be happy to help you with these. For our service this morning, our online chat chaplain will help guide our online folks. And for those of us on site, we will be utilizing the screen behind me to project the words for our unison readings and lyrics for our hymns. You can also follow along with a printed order of service. You can find information on our website, tahomauu.com. Please be sure to read the e-news, the weekly e-news, for important information about our congregation, upcoming events, and volunteer opportunities. If you aren't yet signed up for the e-news, you can do that today on our website so you won't miss a thing. You can also ask me about signing up for the e-news. There's lots of good information in there. There's so much happening here at Tahoma UU. I want to highlight just a few exciting announcements. So first we have from Reverend Margot would like to ask us all, anyone who can stay a few minutes after the service today, to help Reverend Margot put up the Christmas tree. So that should be fun. And also mark your calendars. We will be having a 6 p.m. Christmas Eve service this year. So 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve, we'll have a special service. Join in the caroling and hear a message from angels. If you are a parent or grandparent with a child or teen in our Children's Religious Exploration Program, please see Reverend Margot after the service. She is trying to update the roster for the all the parents of kids here, so that we can better serve your family's needs. She will be up here by the Christmas tree. And then Patty McPhee would like us to share, there will be a wall art and retrospective after the service, after coffee. So please stay for that. Come meet the artists and learn what, how, and maybe even why they create. Ask questions and learn what life as an artist is like, what inspires them, and what their process is. Enjoy light refreshments. So that will be right back here, right after the coffee, after the service. So that is all the highlighted e-news. Again, you can check out the e-news for more information about these and many ways to become more involved and deeply connected with our spiritual community. You are also invited to join us for social hour immediately following the service right here in the sanctuary. There will be coffee and refreshments, and it's a great time to catch up or to get to know someone new. For those of you who are visiting or who are new to our community, we have the red coffee mugs for you to use if you would like to identify yourself and chat. They're actually the best coffee mugs. I like the red ones. As we begin our service, I respectfully acknowledge that I speak to you today from the land of the Coast Salish people, including the Puyallup tribal nation, land from which they were forcibly displaced. I affirm the continued sovereignty of the 574 federally recognized tribes, including the 29 here in Washington, and support those still fighting for federal recognition. I acknowledge the theft, violence, trauma, and racism that Indigenous people have experienced at the hands of colonizers from 1492 through the present day. I honor the resiliency of the Indigenous people and stand with them as they continue to fight for land, water, visibility, sovereignty, and their very existence. Lastly, friends, I invite you to set your electronic devices to worship mode. We are gathered here, one community together. Let us settle ourselves into this holy moment and open our hearts to learn and unlearn, to share and to receive. Now let us join together in worship.
Good morning. I offer you these words from Sri Chinmoy. If I cannot forgive myself for all of the blunders that I have made over the years, then how can I proceed? How can I ever dream perfection dreams? Move, I must forward. Fly, I must upward. Dive, I must inward, to be once more what I truly am and shall forever remain.
All right. So our chalice lighter this morning is our guest speaker, Lizz Zitron. She's a good friend of mine from Pierce College, where she currently works as an associate professor of college success. She is a mom of one. Um, and she has been studying grace through doing interviews and research on her own for quite a number of years and is here to share with us what she has learned. If you will join me now in the, well, nope, she's going to light first. Sorry. There we go. And now you can join me in the chalice lighting words. We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come. And now, if you will rise in body or spirit for hymn number 205 in the gray hymnal, Amazing Grace. I bet you didn't see that one coming. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already gone. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've foolish days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. So I'd like to invite those young and young at heart to join me up front for a story. You read the words. Good job, Charles. Nicely done, Evelyn. Oh, she was tracking in the hymnal for you to follow along? That's really helpful, isn't it, when you're learning to read? Oh, moms have some magic tricks, don't they? Look at all of you beautiful faces up here. I'm so glad to see you. So my book today is called Let It Go. You have one too. And this is called Learning the Lessons of Forgiveness. It's by Naomi B. Roberts and Mufti Menk. That's a different name, huh? Yep. And that is the end of our story. So if you will rise and make an arch to sing the children out. Says as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life, we hold you in our love as you go.
Good morning. We now come to the part of our service where we show our generosity for what this church brings to us and the community. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. As we approach the time for our offering, please give what you will. For the church that has meant so much to you, for the church that's meant so much for those who came before you, and for the church that will mean so much to the people you will never know. The offertory will be taking.
Thank you, Dana. We have Dana filling in for Mary Ann and gifting us with the beautiful music this morning. And now join me in our dedication of our offering. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls. And now, if you would please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 1009 in the teal hymnal. And Sheila has some directions for you on this one.
So we're going to sing this 5 times in all. We'll start with the lowest part. Breathe in, breathe out. You can stay on that part the whole time if you wish. And then those of you who want to join me on the melody, when I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. We'll sing that twice. And you can stay on that part if you wish. And then those of you who want to jump to the descant, when I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. You can join me there twice, and then we will stop. Dave is confused. Don't worry, you'll get it. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
It all matters. If you are standing before me, beaten and bleeding, I cannot tell you to forgive. I cannot tell you to do anything since you are the one who was beaten. If you have lost a loved one, I cannot tell you to forgive. You are the person who has lost a loved one. If your spouse betrayed you, if you were abused as a child, if you have endured any of the myriad injuries humans can inflict upon one another, I cannot tell you what to do. But I can tell you it all matters. Whether we love or we hate, whether we help or we harm, it all matters. I can tell you that I hope, if I am the one who is beaten and bloodied, that I will be able to forgive and pray for my abuser. I hope that I would be able to recognize him as my brother and as a precious child of God. I hope I never give up on the reality that every person has the capacity to change. We can't create a world without pain or loss or conflict or hurt feelings, but we can create a world of forgiveness. We can create a world of forgiveness that allows us to heal from those losses and pains and repair our relationships. Ultimately, no one can tell you to forgive. We can ask you to do so. We can invite you on the journey. All of us must walk our own paths at our own pace. All of us must write our own books of forgiving every single day. What will be in your book? Will it be a story of hope and redemption or misery and resentment? In the end, the forgiveness you seek, whether it's for another or yourself, will never be found in a book. You carry it within your heart. It is described by your humanity. You just need to look inside and discover it. Discover the power it has to change your life and to change our world. Let us listen to what the heart hears. Here is my book of forgiving. The pages are well worn. Here are the places I struggled. Here are the places I passed through with ease. Here is my book of forgiving. Some of its pages are tear-stained and torn. Some are decorated with joy and laughter. Some of its pages are written with hope, and some are etched with despair. This is my book of forgiving. This book is full of stories and secrets. It tells how I finally broke free from being defined by injury and chose to become a creator again. Offering forgiveness, accepting that I am forgiving, creating a world of peace. Thank you. So about 5 years ago, I found myself in the position of screwing up my life in new and interesting ways, ways I never imagined in my teens and 20s, which are hallmarks of screwing up our lives. But this time the stakes were quite different because at that time I was a single mother caring for a 4-year-old. Not very conducive to screwing your life up. I got myself back on a better path for me and my son. And what I was left with, though, was this need to forgive others, and ultimately to forgive myself. Well, I grew up Jewish, very traditionally Jewish, and I'm still Jewish, but I grew up around people who held on to grudges like treasure. I grew up at dining room tables where people sat next to each other, not talking for decades because of grudges. I realized I had no idea how to forgive, like none. It was a foreign language to me. I had no idea what I was doing. Nobody had ever modeled it for me. Now, Judaism, we have the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur, though, it's all about ritual and rules. You know, you have to ask somebody to forgive you 3 times. And if they don't forgive you, then the sin is released. But for all the rules and rituals, I didn't see a lot about the heart. Now, I had also grown up hearing from Holocaust survivors who had managed to forgive from the heart their tormentors. But I didn't understand that. It made no sense to me because of what I saw in my daily life. And then I remembered my friend Rachel. So when I went to library school about 15 years ago, I ended up becoming really good friends with all of the Christians. And I think it's because we had this idea of faith being valuable in common. And I remember my friend Rachel talking about this idea of grace. And she would say, I need to give grace to myself. You know, my dad hurt me. I need to give him grace. And I thought, oh, grace. That sounds really nice, giving people grace. But I had no idea what it meant. It's not something I grew up with. And I thought I knew what it was. And so when I found myself in this situation 5 years ago of needing to forgive myself and others, I thought, you know, grace, that could be a way that I could forgive myself and forgive others. I'm going to go look into that. And interestingly, I was having a conversation with somebody who hurt me dearly, who I would have to forgive at some point. And we were talking about the idea of grace, and he was telling me how grace was so important to him, and it was a way that he lived his life. And I said, well, okay, but what happens when somebody breaks your trust and betrays you? How do they earn your grace back? And he laughed in a very kind way and said, oh, you don't get this, do you? No, I don't. What is grace? And he says, you don't earn grace. It's freely given. I thought, what kind of weird idea is that? Freely given. Everything in life comes with a cost. Everything in life is conditional. And so I decided, okay, great. I got something to learn here. There's a learning opportunity for me. So I reached out to my friend, Pastor Jen. I said, hey, can we talk? can we make an appointment and talk about grace and you can tell me what it is? And like a good academic, I had my notebook and I had my pen and I took great notes. And as I looked back on those notes to prepare this sermon, it was interesting to see how many teardrops I found throughout my notebook about grace. So I sat down with Jen and she said to me, what would you do if I told you there's nothing you can do to make me love you more or less? And that's when I started crying. I said, I have no idea what to do with that. Jen said, I think you're being called. And I think you need to listen to this call, and I'm going to help you. And so for 3 years, Jen, Chrissy, other people set me up with anybody who was willing to sit down for an hour with me and answer the question, what is grace to you? It was an amazing experience. I sat down with total strangers, and an hour later, we were crying and bonded in ways that I never imagined. People told me, pastors told me, you know, I've been talking about grace daily, weekly, and I got on autopilot about it. And you've really forced me to think more about it and what it actually means. So I want to share with you what people so generously gave me from their hearts about grace and tell you a little bit about how it truly has transformed my life in significant ways that I never imagined possible in these past 5 years of my life. The first one was just totally, I'm still grasping with this one, that grace is free. But somebody told me, you know, it's also costly. I read a book by Philip Yancey called What's So Amazing About Grace? And the line that stood out to me was, grace is a gift that costs everything for the giver and nothing for the recipient. You can't buy it, you can't earn it. This is how grace as a tool for forgiveness can often be very different from other types of forgiveness we might practice. Because again, we can't buy it, we can't earn it, either from God or from others. Now, one pastor told me, you know, there's cheap grace, where, you know somebody's going to forgive you because of relationships or there's nature. Cheap grace means that I don't actually try to change. So in Judaism, we have Yom Kippur, but all the fasting and all the ritual actually means nothing if you don't actually change. So if you go to synagogue all day, fast all day, but the next day you do the same thing, yesterday didn't matter. You really have to change internally and externally. So costly grace means that we make actual change, but it also means we expect nothing in return from the other party. It's costly to us because we give it freely with no expectation of them. We must give of ourselves to forgive and give grace. It also costs us in the form of vulnerability. Now, they may not replicate or receive our grace. We have to be vulnerable, though. And we have to be vulnerable with people who might not be safe being vulnerable with. And while it costs us hugely, it also can transform us on an equally large scale. And I promise you this, what we give freely returns to us in the form of our wholeness, of parts of ourselves that we reclaim, we reshape, and we strengthen. Jen told me grace is also enoughness, which is a great word. Let's all adopt enoughness, because it helps us grow and transform, but not because of our deficiencies. We are not deficient. We have enoughness. So when we give grace to ourselves and others, we are accepting our brokenness and the brokenness of others. One pastor told me, our wounds and brokenness are part of our story. Our wounds are gracious points of connections to others, but they do not have to define us. Grace says we are enough because of our wounds. Grace extends to all, but it does not excuse behavior. So even if we cannot forgive or extend grace, sometimes we must be content in knowing that God can, And sometimes that has to be enough. Sometimes that's it. Jen told me a story about somebody she knows who, for Lent, instead of giving something up, allows herself to say whatever she wants about anybody. But afterwards adds, and so do I. And so am I. Grace also requires humility, extraordinary humility. We like to forgive because it makes ourselves feel better. We want to be the bigger person. We want to be the righteous person who can forgive. But forgiveness from a space of grace is not a show we put on. It strips away our ego. It's not about our good character. It's about being vulnerable and humble, even if just to ourselves, particularly if others are not safe to be vulnerable with. Grace requires understanding our part in the grievance, which requires great humility. Maybe we've adopted a victim mentality. Maybe we're refusing to forgive. Maybe we're not allowing ourselves to recognize that we do have the power to break cycles and that we can. When I started this journey, I had a very strong armor on me. I grew up in a family that was and is centered around abuse and addiction, and so that armor is why I was able to make it. A friend once told me, Liz, you're the toughest person I know. And that was a point of pride for me, a point of pride I carried with me for years, not letting people get too close. And then one day, my lovely friend Val said to me, that's not something to brag about, Liz. Have you ever heard about this thing called vulnerability? And I said, well, yeah, I know the word, I know the definition. She said, okay, sit down. So she sat me down. And if you haven't watched Brene Brown's TED Talk on vulnerability, I strongly suggest it. It's what she had me watch. After I watched it, I said to her, who would want to do that? That sounds like a great way to get hurt. She nodded and said, yeah, it is. But she stuck with me, helped me on my journey to vulnerability, giving me a lot of grace and a lot of things to read and think about. And as I practiced vulnerability, I came to realize that we can only give and receive grace when we have our hands open. When it comes from a raw, stripped away place, even if it's just that way to ourselves. Because at our core, with our swords laid down, see, grace expects nothing in return. Grace says that that tender place we tend to hide is enough. That tender place is the place we can forgive freely from because it's stripped of ego, brash, or armor. Grace also requires rest to restart. I learned this from a pastor who was talking me through the Jewish calendar, my calendar, and he pointed out, have you noticed how many restarts there are throughout your calendar, right? There's Yom Kippur, there's the Simchat Torah, which is when we start the Torah all again, read it fresh, and the weekly Sabbath, the weekly rest. He said, these are times where you're required to rest, reflect, but also think ahead to what you want to be different in the coming week or year. Rest allows us to restore ourselves physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Practicing grace, I've learned, requires great strength and energy. And grace is also our attempt to restart, even if it's just for ourselves. We're not wiping the slate clean, but we're making a change in our view towards relationships and situations and how we respond to them. And rest is sometimes how we're able to do that. Sometimes we just need to take a break from our situations and we rest, and then hopefully we can move forward and practice grace again. One of the biggest lessons I learned is about grace being an unclenching, that we don't hold so tight. A pastor told me, Liz, You can choose how tightly you hold on to your grief, your pain, your betrayal. You get to make that choice. You didn't choose what happened to you and what's been done to you, but you do have a choice. And this is your choice. You can let it choke yourself and choke others. You can clench until you are physically tight and in pain. And it suddenly made sense why I had to see a chiropractor so much. He said, or you can soften your body. You can soften your heart. You can unclench and finally breathe. When we hold open our palms, that's how we can give and receive grace as well. Our clenched hands can neither give nor receive. They can only hurt ourselves and others. Grace can restore us. It can right our relationships with others, whether we keep them in our lives or not. And it can right our relationships to ourselves first and foremost. A pastor reminded me, we never go back to where we were, and we have to acknowledge that. We must acknowledge nothing is going to be the same. We're never the same after hurt, betrayal, and abuse. But there's life after that. There's life after that, and grace can offer a way to find healing after hurt. When we have grace for ourselves and others, we can free ourselves of false expectations, shame, and regret. When we see ourselves and others as broken people, we can start to forgive. It's like Leonard Cohen said, the cracks are how the light gets through. And the same is for us. Grace for ourselves and others lets that light in. Even if it's just a little bit, that little bit of light matters. And suddenly we can start seeing what's bright and beautiful in ourselves and in others. That same pastor told me, though, this is important. Reconciliation and forgiveness are separate. I can forgive someone. I can give them grace. I can try to unclench and move forward. And I can do that as a party of one. Now, reconciliation requires two parties who are able to forgive each other and come together where there was once brokenness and try to repair. Forgiveness and grace do not need to include reconciliation, and sometimes they should not. Forgiveness can be enough. Grace can be enough. I had somebody who Chrissy actually introduced me to, who reminded me that grace, we must keep our hands open to be able to give and receive it. But sometimes grace is best given from behind a very strong boundary. Boundaries are born out of grace. The word no is part of the grace we give others and give ourselves. No is a gift to ourselves, and it is a complete sentence. Sometimes in unclenching our hands, we must put them up to protect ourselves and deflect. And as I thought about what he told me, I also remembered how in Judaism, whenever we light candles, we do this motion because we're trying to reflect the light to ourselves and others. And so in unclenching my hands, I'm not just protecting myself, I can also reflect the light to myself and others. Ram Dass has a lot to say on forgiving. And he said that we can keep people in our hearts. But, he said, we don't have to keep them in our lives. And we must extend grace to ourselves to have those boundaries and to acknowledge them as life-giving. I tell my son and my students, everybody's doing their best. All of us. But you know what? Sometimes people's best is really damaging. So love them if you can, but stay far away from them as well. So having enacted a lot of strong boundaries and even ended relationships through this journey, I've been left with a lot of grief. And I've recognized, though, that that grief is actually not about the loss of the relationship like I thought it was. It's the loss of the hope that the relationship could have been different or had been different. The grief is about not having been parented like I needed, or not having parented my child the way he needed to when he was younger. But grace helps me lighten that load of grief. It brings me into my most tender self in a very authentic way that I never knew truly existed. I can be myself more fully from behind strong boundaries or without the presence of some people in my life because of grace. I can wish them love and give them compassion without the pain of betrayal, disappointment, and abuse in my daily life. So here's the last lesson. And this one's hard, particularly if you have been raised white and middle class in our society, because we have been taught that completion is what we're aiming for. And we've been taught, stamp it, it's all done. But what everybody told me is that grace is actually never done. It's a daily practice. And I found a wonderful quote in my journey from Martin Luther King Jr. that forgiveness is not just an occasional act, it's a permanent attitude. And it changes every day also. It's never going to be the same every day, moment by moment. And so letting go of that expectation is very freeing. We must ask ourselves every day, can I forgive them? Can I forgive this or that? Can I forgive myself? And you know what? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes, or maybe, or I don't know. But it's the habit, it's the practice of keeping our hands open to grace for others and for ourselves that one pastor told me is the richest way to be alive. And just when we think we have none left to give, somehow we find more grace to give when we leave ourselves open to it. Grace doesn't wash us completely clean. It's a refresh, but there's no clean slates. Think about a whiteboard that has had math problems drawn on it daily. And no matter how much the professor tries to erase it, right, we still see those ghosts of math problems of old. And just the same with us, right? Our old regrets and pain don't go away entirely. They still seep through. And it's okay. We can remind ourselves of that. And we can give ourselves grace. And we can also remind ourselves that progress is not linear, no matter what we've been taught. And I just want to tell you that grace is not a cure. I am not cured. I am still broken. I'm broken. I am still flawless. See, there you go. I'm still flawed. It's not a cure. It's a tool. It's a tool for dealing with heartache and longing and loss and just being human. It adds a new voice to the negative and shaming chorus inside my head. But I have found the more that I listen to it, the more it drowns out those voices that have been with me for so long. It drowns out the voices of self-hatred, destruction, and grief. So I started developing a practice that I do every day. Sometimes it's in the morning, the afternoon, whenever I have time. And I just simply pause and I open my hands and I ask myself, can I forgive? Can I forgive? It's really transformed my relationship with myself, with others. I asked my son to forgive me. I never grew up with that. I asked my son, can you forgive me? I'm so sorry. My parents like to call that liberal parenting. But what I've seen is that my son now asks me for forgiveness. My son readily tells me, I'm sorry, just through me modeling that for him. My circles have gotten much smaller since I've started this journey, and that's okay. Because you know what? Those circles are actually stronger, they're more meaningful, and they're much more nurturing. So I want to leave you with some words that I found on this journey from Elizabeth Gilbert, who you might know from Eat, Love, Pray. She said, "Grace will take you places hustling can't." Thank you.
All right. So we have now come to the time in our service where we set an intention. I'm going to give us time like I did last week. I saw folks getting uncomfortable. It was only 30 seconds. I'm going to do the same thing this time. If you want to write on the back of your order of service, reflect in your head. But what did you hear this morning in words that Liz shared, in the music, and a conversation that you had that you're going to carry forward with you into this coming week? And how will it affect the way that you do things? So reflect. Thank you. And now if you will rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, it's in the teal hymnal, number 1008.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our hearts lives within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing
When I develop a mindset of forgiveness rather than a mindset of grievance, I don't just forgive a particular act. I become a more forgiving person. With a grievance mindset, I look at the world and see all that is wrong. But when I have a forgiveness mindset, I start to see the world not through grievance, but through gratitude. I look at the world and start to see what is right. There's a special kind of magic that happens when I become a more forgiving person. It is something quite remarkable. What was once a grave affront melts into nothing more than a thoughtlessness or careless act. What was once a reason for rupture and alienation becomes an opportunity for repair and great intimacy. A life that seemed littered with obstacles and antagonism is suddenly filled with opportunity and love.
Please join me as we extinguish the chalice with the words on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. All right, and please join me for the closing song.